Well, I thought we should get to know our new quarterback in 2024. So today I've got a guy who has actually met him a few times. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. So if you have not already, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, please, and thank you wherever you listen to or watch this show, which today is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. A first-time guest here on Locked On Ducks. No guest could be more appropriate for the situation. His name is John Williams, not the composer. I'm sorry to disappoint you all, but I'm going to excite you once again by telling you that he is the host of the Locked On Sooners podcast. He's interviewed Dillon Gabriel before. Everything you need to know about Oregon's new quarterback right here on today's show. John, let's just hop right into it. What should Oregon fans expect from Dillon Gabriel by the time he takes the field in, I don't even want to know how many 100 days from now, because it's sad to think about.
So first of all, this is going to be a guy that is going to fully ingrain himself up there in Eugene with University of Oregon. He's going to be a guy that isn't just a part of the football team to be a part of the football team, but he wants to be a part of the community. He's a relationship builder, and that's the thing that we saw from him early on in his tenure with Oklahoma was he made sure to get with his guys as quickly as possible, get out on the practice field, begin throwing, and then in the summer during the offseason, he likes to take his guys to go do something fun. He did it with every single position group, the offensive line, the wide receivers, the running backs, the quarterbacks, and they just got out to a cabin and they just had fun for a weekend, just building relationship, building time together, building camaraderie. And you saw how that bled over into both the 2022 and the 2023 season. This was a really, really tight-knit group. Through the highs and the lows of the 2022 year, where they went 6-7, to the much improved 10-2 season that we just saw from Dillon Gabriel and the Oklahoma Sooners. And a lot of it comes back to the fact that they were willing to battle with one another. They really were willing to go into the offseason and, improve upon the things that didn't go well in 2022. They really corrected pretty much all of those things going into 2023, which is what made them so much more successful. And that's just the guy that you're going to get off the field. On the field, I mean, to me, he was the most improved player in college football. He was good in 2022. He was great in 2023. And were it not for, the losses to Kansas and Oklahoma State, that Kansas loss, I mean, Jeff Lebby kind of took the ball out of his hands for that game just because of Jeff Lebby and his conservative mindset and his propensity to, get a little bit gun shy when things aren't necessarily in their favor, whether it's the inclement weather or whatever it might be. And then in the Oklahoma State game, that was just one of those bad days for Oklahoma where they had 3 giveaways. One was a Dillon Gabriel interception where he just threw it into like double coverage and expected a 5'10" wide receiver to go be able to get up and get the ball. But all in all, man, the dude was really, 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 really good. And I mean, you're going to get a grinder and a dude that's going to work and work and work on his craft.
Why is he leaving Oklahoma? He could have come back to Norman for one more season, right? Is it as simple as Jeff Lebby, his offensive coordinator, left to go be the head coach at Mississippi State?
It's not that simple, although I do think that allowed for it to happen a little bit more seamlessly. So going into the season, the overwhelming thought was that this was going to be Dillon Gabriel's last year, no matter how it went. You talked to the coaching staff in the preseason. I remember being at OU Media Day and asking Jeff Lebby. Somebody asked Jeff Lebby, and I was standing right there. Is Dillon Gabriel coming back? Is that a conversation you've had? And Jeff Lebby pretty much said, no, he's not coming back. Brent Venables echoed the same sentiments later on in the season. Venables was like, that's not really a conversation we've had. There's a time and place for that. Jeff Lebby was still kind of, no, Dillon's pretty much gone. And the idea was they had the succession plan in place with 5-star quarterback Jackson Arnold that signed in the 2023 class, was a true freshman this past year, saw a little bit of time, but the understanding was that Gabriel would be going off to the NFL not going to the transfer portal. And so the transfer portal thing came as a bit of a surprise to everybody. And I think it's a twofold thing there where, okay, maybe he didn't get the draft evaluation that he was hoping to get. And the rumor is that he came back with an undrafted free agent grade, which, given some of the limitations, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a little bit, isn't all that surprising. At the same time, the guy just came off of a career year where he showed improvement in a lot of areas and showed the ability to be a full system quarterback. He could do just about everything that you'd need him to do on the football field. So it did come as a surprise that he entered the portal. At the same time, if the NFL came back with an undrafted free agent grade in this day and age, with NIL being what it is and Oklahoma having a succession plan, it's not all that surprising to see him go and take advantage of an opportunity to get maybe one more collegiate, quote unquote, payday before, trying his hand at the NFL. Brent Venables said just last week at the Alamo Bowl press conferences that Gabriel was welcome to come back and compete. Now, that compete, is that an operative word? Is that, okay, you're the guy? Because when he showed up in Norman, he was the guy. There was no talk of a competition. It was Dillon Gabriel's our starting quarterback. They minced zero words about it. This was a little bit less certain, less solidified. So there's a lot that goes into it, and Dillon Gabriel will be the person that's best to answer it. But I just think it just came at a good opportunity for him, a good opportunity for the program to kind of have that mutual parting of ways. And I don't think anybody holds any ill will toward Gabriel, and I don't think he holds any ill will towards the university. I think he would have come back. If he would have come back, he would have thrived with Seth Luttrell and Joe John Finley as offensive coordinators. But I think the timing was just really, really good for him and for the University of Oregon and for his pocketbook to get another opportunity before the grind of the NFL comes to him.
Yeah, I don't think the undrafted free agent grade is surprising at all. He's not a big guy. We'll kind of talk about how he played the last couple of seasons in a bit, but he's got a good arm, but not a great arm. He's mobile, but not an elite athlete. He's 5'10", 5'11" or so. He's pretty small in the pocket. But why do you think he chose Oregon? What led him, in your view, and your time having covered him and gotten to know him a little bit, why do you think he looked at the Ducks and said that's the right place for me to go?
I think, one, it's just great opportunity. I mean, the University of Oregon, to me, is a premier program. It may not be a traditional quote unquote blue blood, but in the 21st century, they've been about as good as anybody other than Alabama and Georgia. I mean, they're right in that second tier of programs, especially over the last decade. They've just been a really, really solid program. They've got great, support staff. They've got a great, offensive coordinator. They've got a great, head coach. They're building something that's really, really special. And there's going to be an opportunity to contend not only in the Big Ten, but for a national title, especially as the college football playoff expands next year. I also think there's an intriguing part of this where, they're going to Hawaii week 1 of the 2024 season, which I think that's fascinating too. I don't know if that played any part in his decision at all, but the idea of being able to go home and play in your home state, that probably was not something that was going to be an opportunity everywhere, obviously. And so I think a lot of things just lined up, seeing the seasons that Bo Nix put up over the last 2 years made Oregon a very intriguing opportunity. And then obviously, he shared it in his, announcement that he was going to Oregon, that it was Marcus approved. And I'm sure that there is definitely some Marcus Mariota, at least in the back of his mind, if there was not a direct conversation. But I mean, Marcus Mariota is Hawaii legend. And there's a reason why that guy is so idolized. And it's because he had such a great career at Oregon. And that great career kind of opened the door for a lot of guys from the state of Hawaii. And I think Dillon Gabriel being one of those, and he's got a strong tie to his state and to his people. And so it's not surprising that might've been a part of the conversation as well.
Yeah. And I think that's a factor, that probably was more influential than playing Hawaii in the first week. I think that's probably just an added bonus for him to go play in his home state in a week 0 game next year. But I think the Mariota factor certainly can't be overlooked. But John's got more to share because we're going to talk about the player, what he was on the field for the Sooners over the last couple of years. a big player in the jobs world is LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. For all we know, these coaching staffs are using LinkedIn Jobs to fill their empty quarterback voids, because you know what? They're getting candidates really, really quickly and filling jobs quickly. And guess what? That's what LinkedIn Jobs helps you do as well. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. And hiring's easy when 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, John, that's what we call the second segment sip here on the show. Essential to every podcast. If I don't have it, and you get it as well, look at the cheerful mug. He is in the Christmas spirit, John Williams of Locked On Sooners, continuing on here on the show. A number of questions came in via subtext, by the way. You know who you are out there, about Dillon Gabriel. A couple were about Marcus Mariota, and another one was about whether or not Oregon had ever recruited Dillon Gabriel out of high school. To my knowledge, the answer is no. He was never recruited, was never on Oregon's radar. He went to UCF. He was there for 3 seasons, right? One of which was cut short due to injury, and then Oklahoma for the last 2. He's going to be a 6th-year college football player next year with the Ducks. I mean, we love our veteran quarterbacks in Eugene, clearly, but let's talk about the guy on the field and kind of what he brought to the Sooners offense, because he was there for 2 seasons, missed the Texas game in 2022. They lose 49-0. He plays this year, and they win one of the best college football games of the season. So talk about Dillon Gabriel, the player, what you saw from him in the Oklahoma offense over the last 2 years with the Sooners.
So a very experienced player, a guy that knows what he's doing in an offense. And, there were some people that asked me on our show, why wouldn't he go to Mississippi State, keep that same, offensive systems, be able to stay in that, as opposed to going to Oregon and learning a new system? And I'm like, this dude has played so much football at this point that he can go anywhere and learn any system. That's not going to be an issue. He's a smart player. He knows what he's doing on a football field. He's got an accurate arm. It may not be the strongest arm in the world, and there will be some limitations to his downfield ability, but he is an accurate thrower of the football. He has a quick release. He tries to get the ball out quickly if he can, and he's patient. I mean, he's a patient guy in the pocket, and you kind of alluded to the fact that he may not be an elite athlete, but he's really good at manipulating the pocket and buying time when the pass rush is coming. They were one of the least sacked teams in college football this year, and the offensive line was part of that, but Dillon Gabriel was a big part of it as well. One area in particular where he improved from 2022 to 2023, and to me, he made big improvements, just went to work in the offseason, improved situationally, 3rd down, 4th down, red zone, but really, really improved in the 10 to 19 yard part of the field, that intermediate passing game. You go back to 2022, he only completed 53.1% of his passes for 805 yards. He had a 6-4 touchdown to interception ratio and an NFL passer rating of 91.8. In 2023, that NFL passer rating jumped up to 125, his touchdown to interception ratio 10-2, and he completed 60% of his passes. And that's really what allowed the Oklahoma Sooners offense to really take off. He was just a much more efficient player in the money area of the field. I mean, you've got to be able to attack that 10 to 20 yard part of the field, because 10 yards, that's a first down. And that's what made them so much more efficient this year, especially on 3rd down and in the red zone. The other part of his game that really took off was just his ability to run. He was a good runner, but he became a great runner this year. Now, not the great runner that you might think of like Michael Vick or Cam Newton or maybe even Marcus Mariota, but he became great for himself. Like, he became much more explosive, much more decisive, hit so many more big plays, had 12 rushing touchdowns this year, which was a big jump. He had a career year in total touchdowns with 42, a career year in completion percentage at 69%, and was kind of a dark horse for the Heisman about midway through the season. Had a couple setbacks, but otherwise he played a really, really good year. And the part of it that's going to, I think that Oregon fans are going to love is just his ability to continue to improve. So the guy that we saw in 2023, he's going to get better in 2024. You talked about the Texas game. I mean, that was a seminal moment for Dillon Gabriel. 1:17 left on the clock, and he masterfully drives them down the field to score a game-winning touchdown with 4 seconds left on the clock. And that final play, Oregon fans, highly recommend you go watch that final drive. I'm sure you can find it in its entirety on YouTube after you get done watching Spencer here on Locked On Ducks. He was really good in the pocket. He bought time. Even when he tried to escape the pocket, he was still looking downfield to make big plays. And that final play, I mean, everybody thought he was dead to rights. The pocket's completely collapsing around.
I thought he was going to get sacked. I thought he was going to get sacked.
Yeah. He just looked done. And then he just stood in there, waited just long enough, and then threw a dime to the guy in the corner of the end zone. So the guy is a tough football player that's going to make big plays. And even though he might have some limitations in his arm and his deep ball ability, they will still hit a ton of deep balls because he throws a really, really good deep ball.
So one thing I want to ask you about is his size, and the reason that, we mentioned earlier, he's got an undrafted free agent grade in the NFL. He's not 6 feet tall. I think he's listed at 5'11", which feels generous. He reminds me of a left-handed Bryce Young in that he's not big, he's nimble, but he's not an explosive Michael Vick, Mariota level athlete, like you said, with that high-end speed. He's got a good enough arm, but it is not a Justin Herbert howitzer. And he is someone who just kind of can disappear in the pocket from time to time. How did you see him manage that and continue to be an effective player over the last 2 seasons? And did it ever feel like a limitation for him?
No, he seemed to be able to figure out a way to make it work. And that's including guys like 6'5" Walter Rouse at left tackle and 6'7", Tyler Guyton at right tackle. I mean, he had some huge dudes blocking on the perimeter for him, but he just found a way to make it work, and there might be times where he might've gotten a little skittish at times, but he bounced back. It wasn't a characteristic of his game where, okay, you go back to maybe the Cincinnati game. It wasn't his finest game. He didn't have a great performance, but he just didn't look as settled in the pocket. They were still trying to figure things out up front along the offensive line. Cincinnati had a really good, interior defensive line, especially Dante Corleone, one of the better interior defensive linemen in the country. Oklahoma's still trying to figure things out. That was their first conference game of the season. He didn't look entirely comfortable, but as the season went along, and even though the competition got better, he looked much more comfortable as the offensive line got a little bit more solidified. They had some answers at offensive line. So, he's not the perfect player. Obviously, he's not going to be a guy that Oregon is going to push into the top half of the draft, but he's going to be somebody that Oregon can win a lot of football games with, especially if he can manage some of the environments that Oregon's going to have to go into, especially that game against Michigan and Ann Arbor next year. And if you can manage some of the inclement weather things, because that seemed to be at times a bit of an issue. You go back to the Morgantown, West Virginia in 2022, Oklahoma's one of their worst offensive performances that year. And then you can look at the Kansas game this past year. They had a really good offensive performance, but Jeff Lebby again took the ball out of his quarterback's hands and only allowed him to throw, I think it was 19 times throughout the entire game because the weather was a little bit dreary and there was some, a lot of rain, things like that. How's that going to play up in Oregon? That's going to be a big question because as we know, the Pacific Northwest is going to be a lot of moisture in the air and potentially a lot of rain that they might have to deal with as well.
Well, yeah, you look at the Cal game this year for the Ducks, and it was a big time rainy performance. It doesn't happen as often as people think. It starts in November, though. You can always run into that sort of stuff. John Williams, Locked On Sooners, fantastic stuff. Lots of feathers in your cap for the performance you had here on the show today. So I think I speak for all Oregon fans when I say we appreciate it. But I have to take one of those feathers out. Is that a UT Arlington sweatshirt?
Oh, yeah. That's my alma mater. Undefeated since 1987 in football because we haven't had a program since 1987 in football. The largest school in the state of Texas without a football program. And I don't say that with pride. I say that with much disdain because I have talked with the president on multiple occasions about bringing a football program back, and they've yet to do so. So
UTRGV
yes,
is getting one. I don't know if you know this, but I'm the voice of the Thunderbirds at Southern Utah. So I see the UT Arlington, and I just see a conference foe. So that's the only knock against you here today, John. We really appreciate it. Thanks, man.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Go Ducks. I like your uniforms, so we'll go for
that. We'll take that. We'll absolutely take that. Just fantastic stuff from John right there. FanDuel's got fantastic stuff as well. As the weather gets colder, which it definitely is where I live, the NFL offers stay hot on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. They've got a great interface, and it's super easy to navigate with a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Oregon's a pretty hefty favorite in the old Fiesta Bowl against Liberty, which is not going to feature several key Ducks, as I'll get to in a moment. But you can bet Oregon if you feel confident, because Bo Nix will be there, and that is certainly important. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So for those who are unaware, before I get into the mailbag to end today's show, Jackson Powers Johnson, tier, is going to the NFL. Bucky Irving to the NFL. Kyrie Jackson to the NFL. Still have not heard, as I record this show, Terrence Ferguson, Troy Franklin, Tez Johnson, among others. But Jackson Powers Johnson, Bucky Irving, Kyrie Jackson, they've all played their final game as a Duck, as has Ty Thompson, who thanked the fans first in his Instagram message announcing he was going into the transfer portal. I think I'm speaking for all the Duck fans out there, at least from what I have observed in the interwebs. I know it's not everyone, but we're all rooting for that guy, right? Because I certainly am. And I want him to go be a starter somewhere, and I want him to absolutely thrive. That'd make me feel happy. So questions that came in via subtext, which is the best way to get in the mailbag. There are other ways, though. YouTube comments or Twitter. Subtext is a free 14-day trial. Then it's just $5 a month. You get all sorts of perks over there, including priority mailbag access. Questions that came in that we kind of answered throughout the show. Just don't want you to think that I'm overlooking the questions or anything like that. Did Marcus Mariota play a part in getting him to Eugene? I don't know that Marcus was specifically involved. I think the legacy and influence of Mariota, as John hinted at, certainly helped, because Gabriel is a native of Hawaii. I don't think that Gabriel had ever, thought about Oregon before, looked at Oregon, was recruited by Oregon coming out of high school, which was a long time ago. That was like 3 coaching staffs ago, I think, is at least 2, could be 3. And we got into as well why he chose Oregon, over other schools. And I think it's a good fit. I think he and Will Stein can have a lot of success together, and I look forward to watching it play out. So let's hop into the mailbag here via the subtext community. As promised, priority mailbag as always. Mailbag question. As we move into the Big Ten, could you rate coaching staffs? But let's make it fun. Why not? Maybe use light bulb wattage. So using the 100, 75, 60, 40 watt, and 25 dim bulb labels, I have categorized my perception of the Big Ten coaching staffs, not the teams, the coaching staffs, based on the information that I have as a big-time college football fan who does watch a lot of football outside of the Pac-12. At least I try to, and we, of course, will be watching all of our football outside of the Pac-12 because it doesn't exist anymore for all intents and purposes. So let's start at the bottom. The 25 dim bulbs, the lowest caliber of coaches in the Big Ten. Purdue lost Jeff Brom. He went to Louisville, made the conference title game, and the guy they brought in went 4-8. That's a drop-off. He goes right there. Now, I have Indiana here as well. They hired Kurt Cignetti, I believe is how you pronounce it. He's the James Madison coach. I put him there because it's an unknown commodity as a head football coach coming into a pretty bad Big Ten job. The only time they were relevant was when Michael Penix and Kalen DeBoer were there in the COVID season. That's the only time Indiana football has done anything meaningful in my life. In addition to, what was the name? Tevin Coleman was the running back way back when, who had a good career in the NFL. So those are the only two I put at that level where like I'm just not that concerned by it. Next wattage up is the 40-watt group. Illinois, Brett Bielema. These are the coaches that are, they're fine. Not terrible. They're at jobs maybe that aren't great all the time, but they're maybe slightly below average. They can have some above average years, but they're not going to elevate teams, I don't think, to a conference championship level in the Big Ten. Illinois with Brett Bielema, Mike Locksley at Maryland, they're fine. But their ceiling is 8 or 9 wins, 100%. Rutgers with Greg Schiano, they're back to being a bowl team this year, but kind of feels like that was a better hire back in the early 2010s, though Rutgers is a pretty bad job, to be fair. That's why he's in the 40-watt group, not the 25 dim bowl group. I've got Chip Kelly in there at UCLA because I was asked in this question to evaluate the coaching staff. And Chip Kelly's offense was not always great this season, and I don't think that was all his fault, but he does bear some responsibility given that he's the offensive coordinator. And then they let D'Anton Lynn, their stud defensive coordinator hire, go across town to USC. So it's reasonable to assume defense is taking a step back. I don't know what UCLA is thinking allowing him to do that. Like, you needed to do everything you could to keep him around, but UCLA doesn't care about football very much. And then David Braun at Northwestern took over in a messy situation, got him to a bowl game this season, but I haven't seen anything to indicate he's capable yet of getting above that. So that's where I put him. In the 60-watt group, these are, like standard, solid, not going to bottom out hardly ever, but also hardly are they going to, elevate to the top of the conference or near it. I think PJ Fleck at Minnesota is pretty good. I think Matt Rule at Nebraska will eventually do a good job. He's doing great on the recruiting quarterbacks front. I think Luke Fickell at Wisconsin is solid. I think Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. I almost put Ferentz in the 60-watt or in the 40-watt group. I've got him in the 60-watt group because the defense is outrageously good every year. But the inability to coordinate a semi-productive offense is honestly pathetic. I do not understand how you can't be better. Like, Iowa's a place that cares about football, that likes football, that knows football. And they can't put together an offense multiple years in a row. I mean, their defense is literally championship caliber. I mean, national championship caliber. And they I mean, offensively, it's just a mess. So that one's kind of teetering for me, but the defense is so good, I'll give it 60-watt. Next group, 75-watt. These are coaches that, and look, I'm actually going to change one. Because I had a different label, but that was more team driven than coaching staff driven. So I've got James Franklin at Penn State and Jonathan Smith at Michigan State. Now, Smith is not going to have a tier 2 team in year 1 with the Spartans, but we know what he's capable of as a coach. Michigan State is a much better job than Oregon State. And though Smith this year wasn't able to take that leap forward that Oregon State was hoping for and that they were capable of, maybe in part because he was talking to Michigan State, I think that Smith is really good. And he brought over Brian Lindgren as offensive coordinator and some other assistants. I think that's a real good staff. Don't know if it's a top tier staff yet, but the ones that are, I've got USC. That was the change. I'll explain that in a moment. Kalen DeBoer, we know what he is at Washington, of course. And then Ryan Day, Ohio State, Jim Harbaugh, Michigan. I've got Lanning with Oregon, of course, in the 100-watt department. I bumped up USC as I was recording this show because they hired D'Anton Lynn as their defensive coordinator. Like, when you think about Lincoln Riley teams and why they struggled this year, was it because their offense was bad? No. Is their offense ever going to be bad with Lincoln Riley in the transfer portal? I don't think so, no. And so if you hire a good defensive coordinator, which Lynn clearly is, I mean, UCLA arguably had the best defense in the Pac-12 this year. And we know that Chip Kelly is not doing anything defensively. He's all in on the offensive side of the football. That is now, I think, with D'Anton Lynn, I think that is just such a good hire for the Trojans. I think that's a 100-watt staff. So I think your 100-watt staffs just to recap, are USC, Oregon, Washington, Ohio State, and Michigan. I think your 75 watts are Penn State and Michigan State. I think your 60 watts are Minnesota, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Iowa. Your 40 watts are Illinois, Maryland, Rutgers, UCLA, Northwestern. Your 25 dim bulbs are Purdue and Indiana, though Indiana's got the potential to be better. We'll see what the new guy is able to do. Fun question, though. And it is officially an acceptable time, in my view. I pushed back on it during the season to ask questions about 2024 in the Big Ten. And I think I'll do plenty of talking this offseason about getting to know the Big Ten teams. That'll be kind of a fun series to do at some point. I don't know when. That'll probably be in the spring, but we'll get there eventually. Wrapping up with this question. Mailbag, Locked On Ducks. Jerry Allen has been a beloved member of Duck broadcasts for many years due to his long history in Eugene. Absolute legend, one of the first radio play-by-play guys I ever remember listening to as a kid, him and Dave Niehaus for the Mariners. As he's approaching the end of his career, what promising young broadcaster could possibly step in and create their own long-term legacy with our beloved Ducks? Not so subtle, hint, hint. Jerry Allen is not going anywhere anytime soon. The sentiment is very kind. It's very kind. I appreciate it. Yeah, of course. If I was ever offered that job, I'd take it in a heartbeat. Jerry Allen's not going anywhere. And he actually said on Zach Neal's podcast earlier this year that, he was considering retirement. And then he met Dan Lanning and he said, I think you're going to win a national championship with this guy and I want to be a part of it. And I listen to Jerry Allen all the time. When I'm on the way to Southern Utah games and the Oregon game is going on, before I can get up to the booth and I'm in my car, that's what the radio broadcast is for. And I listen to him and Jorgie, who's been a guest on the show a couple times before, and they are, cream of the crop. Those two guys, legends, fixtures in the Oregon community. And I don't think Jerry's going anywhere anytime soon because I listen to him, and guess what? He sounds the exact same as he did when I was a kid. He's still got the golden pipes. He's still got the energy. He's still a stud through and through. So I wouldn't start counting him out. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day and go Ducks.